Hey guys, what's up? We're back with some more WarFrame action, and today I'm going to be continuing on with the series of videos on damage types. As you know, there are a lot of damage types that exist in the game, so explaining what's good about them and what's bad about them, as well as when you should use them and when you should probably not, is probably going to be a very valuable thing. This is before Damage 3.0, whenever that decides to show up. I have no idea. Our next big rework is going to be Melee, so it'll probably be coming after that. Alright, as you may know already, there are going to be 3 videos, the first one being on IPS, this is the physical damage types, impact, puncture, slash. Second one being this one being on the single elementals, being cold, electric, heat, toxin. And then the final one being on the combined elementals, being of course blast, corrosive, gas, magnetic, radiation, viral, as well as the special ones being true, damage, and void. Okay, so let's get into the single elementals. Now this video is going to be a lot different to the IPS video because for some reason, this is my second take, well, this is my 5th take I guess, but this is my second go at the single elemental video since the original take, for whatever reason, is refusing to render on Premiere or Media Encoder. So I'm going to do it a little bit more raw, we're going to be sort of doing it differently, so yeah. Alright, because of the cosmetic differences when it comes to melee weapons, I will be approaching this particular discussion with a little bit more of a hands-on approach, and we're going to be looking at what it looks like with a sword. Okay, let's start off with our general statement. So, the general statement is this: single elementals typically are weaker than combined elementals, okay? Not only will you end up with less overall damage when you place mods for your single elementals. For example, if you want to achieve a single elemental, you're going to have to use only, when it decides to load, one of the 90% mods, or one of the 60/60 mods, for example, Volcanic Edge, or I guess for the electricity damage, Voltaic Strike. You can only use that mod and that mod only, because the moment you use another 60/60 mod, you're going to get your double elemental, your combined elemental. But also, the damage bonuses, and by extension the damage weaknesses from single elementals only go up to 50%, whereas combined elementals actually can sometimes do 75% more damage versus certain health types. So that's something you need to keep an eye on. So that's why single elementals are going to be a little bit weaker than, well, rather weaker than combined elementals. Yeah. However, there are still some things that are probably worth keeping an eye on when it comes to single elementals, so let's get into it. Now, you may have noticed that I just switched that Shocking Touch mod for a Molten Strike, I think it's called, that heat mod, because the first element that we're going to be talking about is heat. Now, heat, as you may see from my red chroma here, is, well, it's an element that is basically fire. Fantastic. Alright, so what's good about the heat element? Well, the great thing about the heat element is that its status proc is a stun. So, for example, if we manage to actually stun a couple of people with heat, then they will start flailing around, like so. They will start flailing around. That is basically a stun. It's a couple of seconds, but it is a stun that also does a bit of damage over time. That's the idea with heat. Okay, that's what's good about it. Okay, now what's bad about heat damage? Well, in terms of the damage over time, this is actually the weakest of them all, simply because it doesn't go through shields like Toxin or Slash, and it doesn't go through armor like Slash. Okay, so you kind of want to use it against unshielded, unarmored units, which basically brings us to when you want to use it. Unshielded, unarmored units. Now, what race would have a group of unshielded, unarmored units? Well, the Infested. The Infested are very susceptible to heat damage, so you kind of want to use it against them. So let's go and grab some Infested, specifically the Light Infested, because the Infested Ancients don't actually take any particular extra damage from them, so yeah, we don't have to really worry about them. So here are your charges. And that's who you kind of want to go against. Now, keep in mind though that Another example of single elementals being weaker than your combined elementals is this idea that you probably actually want to use gas damage against light infested. Light infested take more damage from gas damage than they do from heat damage, so that's something you want to keep an eye on. Now, there's meant to be this thing with stealth multipliers. For some reason, I distinctly remember this thing where heat damage actually takes a lot of extra damage, or does a lot of extra damage when you do a stealth hit. But when I look on the wiki, I can't seem to find that stipulation, and this is also the case with gas damage, so I'm not entirely sure what is going on here. Oh, and finally, Grineer, who are unarmored. All Grineer who happen to find themselves unarmored, whether it be through corrosive procs or fracturing crush, etc., they actually take a bit more damage against heat. So there we go. Now, when would you actually avoid using heat damage? Well, you'll actually want to not use heat damage against Corpus, specifically anyone who uses something called a Proto Shield. You'll have to jump onto the wiki to figure out who actually uses a Proto Shield, but my go-to example of a Proto Shield would be the Corpus Techs. Those are the big tall dudes with the Supras that do way too much damage and have a lot of health. Their shields are actually strong against heat, and also against armored Grineer. For example, these dudes. Okay, these dudes standing among these charges, they actually take less damage, not just because of armor, but also because the armor itself further mitigates that damage. So, there we go. Alrighty, so let's have a look at what heat damage looks like on a sword. Heat damage on a sword, when the sword decides to have some red color right there, that is the heat effect in full force. There we go. Notable weapons that have a better heat effect would be the Silver and Aegis. Not the Prime, the regular, Silver and Aegis. There we go. So that's the effect of heat on a sword. Okay, now we are going to jump on to our Blue Eyes White Dragon. That is, of course, our Chroma that is cold, so we're going to jump to a white energy type, and we're going to drop in a cold mod. So where is that cold mod? Here we are. Okay, cool. Now that's not a good thing. Alright, so while there we go. Okay, let's just quickly change this back to white. Well, not back to, but let's change this to white. So this is what cold looks like on a sword. This is the effect. A bit of snow, some frost, some ice growing, some ice growing and disappearing from the sword as it sort of moves around. That's the effect of cold on a melee weapon like Galatine Prime. Okay, what's good about ice damage? Well, cold damage rather. Well, the status proc slows enemies down. This is a very important thing because not only do you slow enemies down, you actually increase the duration of any status effects that they may be under. For example, if you are using a radiation proc and then you use a cold proc on that particular enemy, that radiation proc then goes for longer. Okay, we will talk about this later in the when to use section of this element. Yeah. So there is a slowdown, and then there is also an increase of the status effect. Okay. There's also this other thing where the slowdown of the enemy also not only slows down their movement, but also slows down their attack speed. This includes anyone who uses a gun. For reasons. I don't know why, but that's the reason. Okay, so that's what's good about cold damage. That's the reason. I don't know. Okay, what's bad about cold damage? Nothing! There's actually nothing wrong with cold damage. Hooray! Let's move on. Okay, so when would you use it? Like I said, you'll probably want to use it with alongside a combined elemental or some other elemental that has a duration. For example, heat, if you can somehow get it to work with, I think, his sticks, you can actually get a heat proc on something, then switch to cold, and then get a cold proc. That might be the way to go if you want to use cold damage with another single elemental. Yeah. Otherwise, you're probably more likely to use radiation or gas. corrosive doesn't really mean anything because corrosive has an infinite proc, at least in terms of weapon procs. So corrosive cold is vaguely meaningless, whereas whereas cold radiation, the cold actually can serve a purpose of increasing the radiation duration. Fantastic. You also want to use this particular element against corpus, in particular your regular corpus. For example, your trash mobs like your crewmen, because cold damage actually does more damage against regular shields. Fantastic. There we go. And against bombards, for whatever reason, alloy damage actually takes in a little bit more extra damage, but it's still armor, so that extra damage is going to be heavily mitigated by that armor. Alrighty. When would you want to avoid using cold damage? Well, you actually want to not use it against infested ancients, because cold does a little bit less damage against fossilized health, okay? Furthermore, you get that doubly thing where infested ancients can neutralize some procs, can neutralize some status effects. So if you're increasing the duration of a status effect against something that neutralizes status effects, yeah, that's not going to be a good idea. Okay, if you want to go extra ham on shields, like I am against these crewmen, if I was actually attacking shields, see 507 damage right there, 338 damage against the flesh, see extra damage against the shields. If you want to get even more extra damage against shields, for example, if you're going up against extra shield sorties, you will want to actually throw in an electric mod to your cold damage, and then you can get magnetic damage. That'll give you more damage. Yet another example of a single elemental doing reasonably well against a particular health type, but the double elemental actually doing way better. Okie dokie. Now, we are going to move on to the electric damage. So first off, let's change this to blue or maybe dark blue for that electric damage, for that black lightning on the sword, black lightning from the Young Justice cartoon, specifically that depiction of black lightning, as opposed to the Black Lightning TV show, where I think the lightning is a little bit less black and more just straight up blue lightning. But anyway, okay, we're going to turn ourselves blue. Excellent. So we have electric damage, and there is the electric effect on the sword. Just have a look at the tip right there. Bit of sparks flying around. Fantastic. Awesome. Okay, let's talk about what's great about electric damage, which is the proc. That's really the only thing that is good about electric damage, is that it has a proc. For example, that is actually the proc for electric damage. What's the problem with electric damage? There are a handful of things that I don't particularly like about electric damage, which is the status proc. But wait, didn't you just say that the status proc was like the only good thing about electric damage? Yeah. The status proc of electric damage is great, except I just killed everything. That was fast. The status proc of electric damage, for whatever reason, it's chain lightning, but the chain is really, really short. It's only 3 meters. Which is not really long enough at all. Like, to the point where, like, dudes are standing, like, right next to this corpus crewman, and they don't get hit. Like, it's short. It's very, very short, okay? 3 meters is basically nothing in this game. So, yeah. Also, the damage type itself, overall, it's actually really, really mediocre. There's nothing special at all about it. It's not like... yeah, it's not all that great. So, of all the damage types, or single elementals rather, I would probably say that electric is the weakest. Alright, when would you actually use electric damage? Well, you would actually use it more against robotic enemies, for example, mowers. So let's kill these dudes. Let's clear the board, and let's get ourselves some... where are you? Some mowers. Where are you? There. Starts with an M. Come on. Use your letters. usually, here's a mower. Okay, these mowers will do. You want to use them against robotic enemies, namely mowers, rollers. There's not that many robotic enemies around. The only real robotic dude that you probably want to use it against is any robotic boss, I guess. For example, the hyenas or the raptor. I don't know. Like, you really don't want to use electric damage against robotic, I guess. There's better ways of dealing with them. Radiation for one of them, I think. Actually, I didn't put that in the notes, so I don't remember. Okay, when would you specifically want to avoid electric damage? Because you kind of want to avoid it anyway, in my opinion. Where do you want to specifically avoid electric damage? It's against bombards, because alloy armor mitigates electric damage. Not just because it's an armor, but because it's alloy armor, it mitigates it further. So, yeah, don't want to use it against bombards. Okay. Okay, let's change now to the final element. We're getting there, everyone. I'll probably do the same thing for the combined elemental video, so that one's going to be nice and long, as my nose continues to itch up. Oof, yikes. Okay, so in order to change to our toxin damage, we are going to go back to a green look, as well as change this to green. And we are going to put on the toxin mod for melee. There is a thing called Prime Fever Strike. Fantastic, 10 out of 10. For heat, there is something called Prime Heated Charge. That is for your secondaries. For cold damage, there is primed cryo rounds for your primary weapons, outside of shotguns, because shotguns have prime charged shell. Yeah, I think that's what it's called. Wait, I can check. Prime charged shell. There we go. So, which I actually don't bother to use. Okay, interesting. So yeah, so prime charged shell is the primed electric mod for shotguns. Okay. So this is the look of toxin damage. As you can see, there's like this sort of gaseous particle effect going on the sword. Yeah, that's your toxin damage right there. Alrighty. Now, what's great about toxin damage? Well, toxin damage is special in that it completely ignores shields. Now, you may be wondering, what do you mean? Have a look. Observe. Notice how this mower's shield count is not going down at all, but its health is going down rapidly because toxin damage ignores shields. That's the gig. Okay, fantastic. So, because it bypasses shields, you can use it against all corpus. Great! The status proc of toxin damage is a damage over time. That also goes through shields. So that's the deal with toxin damage. Typically, people will say that toxin damage is the strongest of the single elementals, simply because it can go through shields, basically nullifies half of what corpus is all about. Yeah. Now, what's bad about toxin damage? Well, like cold damage, there's actually nothing in particular that's wrong with toxin damage. So yeah, great, let's move on. Now, when would you use it? Like I said, you want to use it against corpus because it ignores shields. Great, but there are some enemies that have a lot of health. For example, corpus techs. Okay, corpus techs have a lot of health, but here's the thing. Corpus flesh rather, takes extra damage from toxin, meaning that even though you are fighting a lot of health from a corpus tech, you're going to do some extra damage, which will help kill that corpus tech a little bit faster. Fantastic. Alrighty. Also, for reasons unknown, toxin damage does a little bit more damage against ferrite armor. Who has ferrite armor? Heavy gunners. And most Grineer trash mobs. So, yeah, toxin damage. Great against pretty much every corpus enemy in the game. And I'm including robotics because it goes through shields. And good against most of the most common Grineer enemies. Yeah, excellent. Now, when would you want to specifically avoid toxin? You kind of don't want to use it against toxic ancients, okay? Because fossilized flesh has a resistance against toxin damage. Okay, so you're going to be doing less damage against fossilized flesh, and that includes the status proc. Okay, you're going to want to jump on the wiki to get a full breakdown of the math on toxin damage and damage over time calculations. But suffice to say, toxin damage does poorly against fossilized flesh, which includes toxin ancients. But toxin ancients in particular, not ancient healers. Ancient healers have a mitigating thing of their own, but toxin ancients in particular neutralize toxin procs. So yeah, toxic damage rather, is super duper ineffective against toxic ancients. Wow, I can't say that word properly at all. Alright, so that's it. There we go. There's your single elemental damage, a video that's not really going to require a lot of stuff in the editing process, thankfully, I guess. But yeah, that's the video about single elementals. Let me know what you think about the single elemental damage types in the comments below. I will be going over the combined elementals soon-ish, maybe, I don't know, but it will probably be the same way I have done this video as opposed to the IPS video, simply because it looks like my computer can't handle an edit like that again. I don't know why. It refuses to render, and frankly, the editing process was a bit of a rump. Okay. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you really enjoyed this video, maybe consider subscribing to the channel, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye!